Hello! We're here! We made it! Just realized the music wasn't playing this whole time. How are we all doing today? I'm so excited to be back here again with you all. Especially after yesterday, which was a delight, but also very short. Today, it'll be different. Today, we have a full, regular time. What a wonderful time. Doing great. Yay! Wave Quest. My favorite. My favorite. Oh my goodness. 17% of employees got cut at Discord today. Jeez. Absolutely wild. Layoffs, man. Absolutely wild. Goodness gracious. Let's not talk about layoffs. Let's talk about how to make games. I'm really excited. We have very exciting. Something get this microphone at least protruding out of the correct corner or something. So it looks less annoying. Oh, let's just throw it. Nobody cares about the mic. Also, you'll notice the green screen completely set up before we even started. No fiddling around with things. We may have found the secret sauce for a little bit, at least. And then the time of year will change, and then color temperatures and everything will be all off the charts. So we'll have to go do it all over again. But today, we were talking about mechanics. Yesterday, we... excuse me. Yesterday we went through our different persona types and we sorted them to who is kind of the primary individual, right? That we're trying to satisfy, so that we can know this is the most important person for us. If we're hitting this, then we're probably going to be well on our way to success. And then we want these other systems to kind of feed in to the RPGer, right? So that's what we're going to be doing today. Today, we will take the mechanics for each of these. We're going to list them out in list format. Like so. And then we're going to start kind of seeing how they fit into each other, how we can remix them to reinforce them together, come up with a couple of different ideas of things we can build quickly, and start getting a prototype built. That's the goal for today. We'll see. So, to copy all this over, once again, the reminder being that our objective, our emotional objective, is leading someone through a journey of fear and insecurity, trying to do good things, but being terrified, and then finding some spark of love in their lives, and then riding that spark of love to courage, freedom, and hope to do the things that they were afraid of doing. So, that's our objective. I think we need a table. I think we need tables. How do we want this table to actually function? 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that should probably be it. So we have RPGer, green, not fill green. I want the text to be green. Excuse you, Figma. Really? There's no option for changing the text color? Oh my goodness. And you can't copy styles. Rad. Okay. Tables. Not meant for this program. Okay. Got the hacker. Really? Ugh. Need to go jump over to Google Sheets, I guess. Next time. Next time. And then we have verisimilitude. Precision. There we go. Now I'm getting the keyboard shortcuts. Challenger. Look these four. You are red. And we need another one down here. Copy all this, or cut it, and then have this be blank. And then we have our mechanics. Mechanic 1, mechanic 2, mechanic 3. And really, we should be doing this in Airtable, because that would allow us to do some more fancy kind of data matching things, but we'll do this for today. See where it takes us. So, mechanics in RPGer. Take a look at our games. Enjoys character development and increasing capabilities. So, one thing is, I think a big part of this is scarcity, right? Which you may not say as a mechanic, but I think is something very important to call out. You can't have meaningful character growth from a building your character perspective if you can just pick everything, right? So I really think the heart of the RPGer is scarcity. It's very carefully planned scarcity. And that can be reflected in talent pools. It can be represented in equipment. And then that's only talking about mechanics of numbers, right? It has nothing to do with narrative. I think a big part of these is upgrades. Upgrades, which you could say talent and equipment are, and I think that we could probably make them subordinate to this. But then we talked about this the other day in the stream, we have meaningful milestones. Because the RPGer, the big difference between the RPGer and the accountant, right? The accountant just wants growth for growth's sake. The RPGer wants growth in order to accomplish something, to have an impact on the world. The accountant is perfectly fine with just the numbers being better. So. Meaningful milestones, upgrades, and then I think there's a certain sense of ownership that needs to be present in any great RPG, right? Ownership meaning this is my version of the character. Nobody else has this version of the character, right? And that kind of plays back into scarcity. This is an interesting discussion for me. What is the heart of RPG in these games? Like, let me boot up. Orb of Creation. Sorry, jeez. Wow. That was loud. Just turn the music off. Wow. Woo. Brutal. Go back here. Hold on. Hold on. Hold the front door. What is this thing? What is happening here? There we go. Okay. So Orb of Creation loadouts, which is kind of like equipment, right? That's kind of how they conceptualize equipment. In fact, I'm going to put it under upgrades. Let's see. What else have we got here? I think that a big thing about these RPGs is that there is a variety of upgrades. It can't just be one thing, right? You can't just have one attribute that you care about because now it's no longer an owned thing because everyone's going to be going up that. It essentially removes scarcity in a big way, right? So we see that in, you know, all of these different levels here. I think one thing we could talk about is the method in which we obtain upgrades. There's experience. Or usage. There's experience of milestone completion. There's experience of... this is kind of subordinate to milestone completion, but there's that notion of role play, right? Of acting in the way that the narrative rewards. And kind of what I'm thinking there is, if you ever played a role-playing game that's based off of that's a Powered by the Apocalypse game, right? You get experience at the end of a session, not just based on how many things you killed, not how many quests you completed, but usually there's stuff specific to your character. Like, if you are a bruiser meanie, did you solve problems through violence today? If so, mark an experience. Did you, if you're a wizard, did you learn something different about the world that you didn't know before? If so, mark an experience, right? That sort of concept. And something interesting that I'm seeing is that essentially, Orb of Creation is 30 billion different experience bars, all labeled on top of each other. And some you gain by usage, some you gain through milestone completion. Like, we had to buy those first couple of upgrades in order to unlock this, right? Then there's others where it's not an unlocking thing, so it's not really a milestone, but we just incrementally get better at it, right? How is that still so loud? Oh my goodness. Oh, did we set it to be like automatic or something? Oh, that's right. No, they just have loading bars, right? So another way to obtain upgrades is through currency. You spend currency, right? That could be buying a magic item at a equipment shop. It could be using your mana here and these other resources that you're generating. Okay. And that currency, once again, ties back into scarcity because you can only have so much. The hard cap on resources, very important for this, right? That's why the hard cap has to exist. Because if they didn't have a hard cap, that scarcity goes away. Now, all of a sudden, I don't have something nearly as mine as someone else might. Okay. Okay, that's all very interesting. What is happening? OBS, you are freaking out, my friend. All right. Perfect. That was a great short today. Well, thank you. I hope YouTube agrees. Been doing a lot of research on YouTube today in particular and elsewhere. And it's definitely, we got to figure something out. We got to figure out how to game that. And I need to find a way to get it in front of people who like it so that YouTube can stop pulling the lottery machine of this person might like it for a year until they develop a good profile for what it is we're trying to do. I need to find a way to get it in front of people so it can actually understand. But thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see here. Yeah, it's been pretty wild. We got our first organic comment on a video of a stream video. The other day. It was very cool. It was about the dogs watching ticker up here. But that was wonderful. It was like, hey, someone has observed, they've come in. Great. So yeah, we're excited. We're moving forward. Also, I was looking at my audience the other day. Cool stuff in there. First off, we need to actually, here. We need to talk. I'm looking at my analytics right now. There's a very specific trend in who is watching this. And it's not surprising at all, unfortunately. 90% of people watching these shorts are male. Ha! 9.4% female, 0.4% user specified. That's a problem. Do we think we're going to get cool, fun, interesting ideas that push genres forward if 90% of people are coming from very similar backgrounds? I don't think so. There are some fantastic female streamers on Twitch streaming video game development like all day. Like all flippin' day. And I'm not joking. They put me to shame. Not only in dedication, but also in technical know-how and skill set. They're absolutely amazing. In fact, we may raid one of them when we're done with the stream today, because I'm in awe over what I've been observing the last couple of days. These gals are pulling 12-hour days. I mean, that's literally in their stream. They have an overlay that says 12-hour days, nonstop, no breaks, no days off, and it blows my mind. And I think they need to work. Unfortunately, they need to work a lot harder than like I do, because now they have to appeal to people who are not like them necessarily, right? That you could say there are advantages in ways I don't want to discuss, but they are putting in incredible efforts and are amazingly talented. Something else really cool that I'm seeing in the shorts, we have 4.5% user views of 13 to 17-year-olds, which is cool for a lot of reasons. First off, that means that we're not necessarily appealing to the lol-K group, right? This is not people that are just watching it for entertainment. Most of our viewership is 18 to 44 years. That's the vast majority of our viewership. And that's probably right. That's probably where we want to be hitting. That's saying these are people that are probably looking to either enter or transition into the video game industry, and they are getting served this. That's, as far as age goes, that's good. But there's also 4.5% of those 13 to 17-year-olds that also need to hear a message that you may want to work in this industry, and people are probably going to tell you that's a bad idea. And many others need to create content that says it's not a bad idea. You just have to be smart. This is a saturated market in some ways. It's also a tremendously underserved market in many others. There's so much potential. The TAM is probably the biggest out of any industry on planet Earth. There's space. They can do it. And then the last cool thing I want to bring up, I was looking at my subtitles. They were like English, or rather, first up was no subtitle, and then English, and then Zulu. Isn't that rad? Oh my gosh, I thought that was the coolest thing ever. That's another short I need to make of you, whoever came here, getting this translated into Zulu. I desperately hope you decide to make a game, or you are making a game, and when you start, or when you're ready, please, like, share it with us, because I want to see what that is. I want to see what someone who speaks Zulu natively creates. I think that would be incredible. So, neat stuff behind the scenes. Let's get back to games. We've got currencies as a big part of this. Oh. And I'm not going to bring up narrative, because that's something we're going to have to thread throughout all of these. And I'm already kind of straying a little far from maybe where I should. Possibly. But I think it's pretty cool. I think this is being helpful for me to conceptualize the space, right? I think inherent to this concept of loadouts is not only the fact that there are loadouts, but that you can't use everything you have acquired. Right? I think that's a very crucial part of an RPG. We would like to see that as well. I know, right? It'd be fascinating. I'd love it. All right, so the Logician. Whew, that whistle, every now and again, that sound gets made. And I don't know if the microphone is filtering that out or not, but I do this really high-pitched whistle, completely unintentional. Okay. We're on the Logician. Focuses on understanding game mechanics, but loses interest after uncovering all the twists. So the Logician is going to be a little weird here, because I don't think they necessarily have mechanics so much as they have an interest in mechanics. And that those mechanics, the important thing is that they interact in a novel way. I think I heard the whistle, but it was pretty faint. Good, I hope so, because it's really loud for me. So the mechanics need to layer on top of each other. And there needs to be a feeling of more. Right? Not hearing it here? Good. Good. Glad to hear. Glad to have it not be heard. Thank you for letting me know. So, there needs to be this feeling that there's something more on the horizon, right? So they need, more than mechanics, they need a promise of what's to come. That if you keep going a little bit more, things are going to change again. you'll have a brand new set of mechanics to start keeping you interested. So like a logician, I don't think cookie clicker really hits very hard, right? We put that very minorly. Same thing with clicker heroes. And they got worse and worse and worse over time. But then Idle Flare starts introducing all these new mechanics, and they start to layer on top of each other and support each other. Same thing with Orb of Creation, same thing with Norp Analog, Stone Story, Fableverse, all that stuff. So, I think that's the key thing. Not only does there have to be more, they have to know that there's more, but not exactly what it is, right? It needs to be a who's that Pokemon silhouette sort of experience. And they have to interact with each other in a meeting. Because if you just say, we were an incremental game, and now we're shifting to be a 4X strategy game that is new mechanics, but they don't interact with each other. There's not... How is it written up here? There's no twist, right? That's not a twist. That's a hard bend. The twist needs to influence what came before, right? So twists influence all that came before it. If we throw things away, we lose it. We lose the logician. Because now it's not about... Or rather, maybe they still are there a little bit, but we lose trust. And they don't really know what this is going to become. And so now it's less interesting. There are games that kind of do this, like Evoland is an example that kind of plays around with this a little bit. But you gotta be really careful, it's really hard, and I don't think it would really be central to our narrative. So, that twist has to hit everything that came before it. Hacker. We have auto clickers. We have scripting languages. We have... What do we have? Let's take a look at our strong hackers. Automated upgrades. Automated purchasing. And optimization. That's really what they're trying to do. They're not necessarily just trying to buy upgrades. They're trying to automate the optimization. So it's no longer something they need to worry about. They set it up and it runs, right? These are the people that are doing drop shipping businesses where they come up with a couple of designs per shirt a couple times a year and then ship them off to Printful and don't worry about it. And everything is taken out of their hands. They like creating a system that is autonomous and that beats another system. So I'm gonna try and find a way to distill that. Setting up systems that can autonomously overcome other systems. And not just other, but game generated. Setting up custom systems that can autonomously overcome game generated systems. Now for the accountant. The accountant needs, very similar to the RPGer, they need upgrades. Very different to the RPGer, they don't need scarcity. They don't really care. They just want numbers go big. The obtaining of upgrades is going to be a less emotionally rewarding thing for them. Because, once again, for the RPGer, it's about the milestone. For the accountant, it's about the number. So what they need is a constant visualization of what they are generating, right? If you had Cookie Clicker, let me bring up some pictures here. Okay. Take a look at this. If you had Cookie Clicker, without this green text here telling you how many cookies each of these was giving you, without these pointer fingers tapping the cookie, without this pop-up text, without these numbers, without all of these cookies flying in the background, if you remove those UI elements, right? So nothing has changed mechanically, right? They're still generating the same amount of cookies that they always have. But all the feedback is gone. Now, the accountant can't have that feeling anymore of what they have accomplished. Or not of what they've accomplished. What are they generating? Right? The upgrades, that's very RPG-er, right? And I would argue not quite so much the accountant. But these numbers, these are what the accountant thrives on. Same story with Norp. No, you didn't mishear that. I said Norp. Take a look at this. Norp Apolog. All of this visual nonsense over here, that spectacle, is specifically targeting accountants. This is the visualization of how much you are generating. And then it's why, once again, those colored rainbow rocks were the core vital component of Norp Apolog. Without these colored rocks, I would bet 70% of the satisfaction of that game disappears instantly. Nothing has changed mechanically. In fact, you still have all the same visualizations as before, except for color. That color is what makes Norp Apolog. We can do a whole short on that. I will. I'm going to write that down. That's a really good short. Where are my ideas here? The key to Norp Apolog was rainbow rocks. And I mean that sincerely. I genuinely believe that. If they did not have those, wouldn't have been good. Wouldn't have been anywhere near as successful as it is. So we need the visualization. Absolutely crucial. And then they need ways to improve. They need to augment the generation, which is important. That kind of goes into upgrades to a certain degree. But I think the key thing that needs to be discussed here is that it's not just in acquiring new. Not just new. It is also, we have to improve the old currencies. Can't just do one thing, right? They need to see growth in generation. And I think my hypothesis would be if they have to abandon the old currency or just be stuck with the old currency generation, like if you get 1 gold per second through the entire game, I think that would drive an accountant crazy. Even if that gold is not incredibly important, or it's going to give you all that you would ever need in one incarnation of the balance of that game, it would drive them batty. They need to be able to improve it and visualize the improvement. Okay. This is rad. This is super rad. I'm loving this. I hope you are too. I'm getting so many great thoughts on this. This is so great. This is why it's so important to write things down. In the immortal words of the mad lad himself, Adam Savage, remember kids, the only difference between goofing around and science is writing it down. It's why this streaming is so important to me. Not only is it crucial to the vision, we can't have cohorts of strangers coming together to build tightly scoped, low budget projects within 6 months and release it and sell it so they have a project to their name to get jobs at game studios. The audience is crucial for that. But more than anything, before we even get to that point, where I can get myself to the point where I can help those people actually accomplish those things, I have to be able to do this. And being on stream, talking through it with all of you, hearing your thoughts, hearing you challenge my thoughts, being able to vocalize and write down and explore concepts without it all sticking in my head accelerates my progress 1,000-fold. So thank you, everyone who is here. You are actively helping me simply by lurking, by being a presence. Thank you. So check out verisimilitude. How are these games building verisimilitude? A lot of it is art. Fair. Art style. Style being the key word. You can't just have really highly rendered generic fantasy peasants. That's not going to invoke a feeling of verisimilitude very well, right? I think there is an amazing example of the way you can have highly rendered, wonderful things, but also draw people into a world. And I'm going to bring some stuff in here, put it on stream that I think WipeQuest will be unhappy about, but that I think are incredible and showcase verisimilitude very powerfully. Didn't even know she was doing it. First up is this. You see that? You may not be able to completely make out what this is because it is a low fidelity conceptualization. But this is a board drawing for a board game that we produced a long time ago and never actually finished, which just breaks my heart to this day and will be, I think, possibly the next project we do after this incremental game. Oh no, she says. I love this thing. Okay, let me tell you why this is evocative. Okay, this is not scribbles. This is world building. Okay, the plot of Moon Hollow is that there's a large magical tree in which many bugs live. It's a big bug utopia. Eventually, the king goes bad and seals the tree off, capturing everyone inside. So now these bugs have lived for generations in a lightless society where everything that they're able to see is generated by artificial light. And that makes many bugs go crazy, especially the not nocturnal, not diurnal, the us ones, the ones that stay awake during the daytime, the ones that like the sun, they go bonkers. And there's a large sphere of energy on top of the king's palace that is the only light source people don't have to make. And so they start worshiping this as the sun replacement, and they start this sun cult, and it goes crazy. So what you can see here is, I love this drawing so much, and you probably can't even see it. We have the tree here, gnarled and twisted. There is a hint of grandioseness about it, but you can see all of these little lines indicating kind of a wrinkle, age, problems, something corrupt, something has gone wrong. These toadstools coming off of it, stuff faintly in the background, almost like a faded memory. Diurnal is the antonym of nocturnal. Thank you, diurnal. Okay, so then I was thinking of whichever one is the like halfway, like rabbits. WipeQuest will know this one. What are rabbits? that are like crepuscular? Crepuscular? I think that's it. Yes, WipeQuest. Thank you, crepuscular. Absolutely. Cool. Thank you, chat. I can always count on chat. And this tells a story. This is evocative. This is not just like an AI-generated picture of a tree, right? And then we go to the box art concept. And you'll notice this if you're on YouTube. This is the banner that we have on it. And I think it might be like the "we're offline" message that's on Twitch as well, because I love it so much. This is the King Loon, the mad King Loon. as he is got a secret, right? This is not highly rendered. This is still definitely low fidelity. There's a lot of details that I know WiFQuest would like to iron out in all this and render out more fully. But this is an example to me of characterful, evocative art. If we compare this with, if I Google fantasy soldier, right? I'm just gonna grab something really quick. This guy. Not fantasy, but also, you know, kind of boring, right? It might sell well. But ultimately, it's not really telling a story, right? There's no verisimilitude here. Even though it's highly rendered, highly polished, zero verisimilitude because it's not inviting me into the world. Okay, there we go. We're getting to here. Okay. It needs to invite into the world. That's key. It has to be a world worth exploring, and there has to be an open invitation to come in. And keep in mind, this is very similar to the hacker, right? The hacker archetype does not necessarily need to overcome walls that it shouldn't, just needs to feel like they shouldn't, right? You can throw up a wall as a game designer, have a big sign that says beware of panthers, and then have the little holes in the wall for them to build a ladder into. And then they feel very clever. Same thing with verisimilitude. They need an invitation, but that doesn't have to be a letter. Although, cleverly, you ever notice in Mario 64, literally gets a letter inviting you to come in and explore. Smash Brothers, same thing. Very clever. Very, very clever design. But it doesn't have to be that. In fact, you can be outright hostile to the player if you can be hostile in a way that is actually an invitation, right? So you can say, don't come into here, it's not worth it, this hostile, I will fight you, right? A really good example of this that we can observe in a game in the wild right now, is very, very successful, is Super Hot, and nobody discusses this. The only thing that people discuss in Super Hot is the stopping time mechanic, but if you play the original, you will find a very hostile narrative. It's literally meta breaking the fourth wall, being aggressive towards you as a player. It's saying, you went through another level. We told you to stop doing this. Stop it. And then I don't remember how they do this. I need to go through and force myself to play through it. I started playing Super Hot for a while and then stopped because, frankly, I got a little spooked. Because they do things like, we're looking through your window right now. We see you. Stop it. Right? Ooh, wow. Powerful stuff. Okay? So it doesn't have to be an invitation necessarily, but that narrative device that they use kind of compels you to come along. It's an implicit invitation. It's subtextual. Powerful. Okay. Last up, I need to show this one, even though I've already made my points. I need to show this one because it's my favorite thing that WiFQuest has ever produced. Favorite thing she's ever made. I'm honored that it was for a board game that I made, and I desperately want to see an entire world in this. Can you look at this and not be drawn in by what is happening here? The incredible composition and wonderful monochromatic color scheme, kind of that monochromatic color scheme feeling warm, cozy, but then it stands in very stark contrast to the content. And you have ladybugs. Aww, I love ladybugs. That's so sweet. Superb. Yes, I completely agree. 90 100%. I love ladybugs. They're the best. Oh, this is so nice. Wait a minute. This is on fire. And he looks mean. And in fact, like, this guy has claw marks on him. And you start to then notice the the markings that they have, they're not normal ladybugs. They got like these spikes and everything. And this guy, oh my gosh, he has actual spikes on, like a spiked collar on a dog. What is happening here? You see the piercings, you see the sun motif, and it creates this feeling of novelty and invites you into that world. What kind of a world has sentient, mean ladybugs and this sort of religious iconography of the sun, right? Because that's not inherently sinister, but paired with all this other stuff and in its differentness, drives you to think about stuff, right? Love it. Absolutely fascinating. I adore this piece, the Sparkers. For those of you who want a little sneak preview of Moon Hollow, which we'll get to hopefully later this year, they are a part of that sun cult that I mentioned before that just lost it because they have lost their natural anchor to this force of nature, gone, and they've replaced it with something else, and they are just fanatics, and they spend their days kidnapping people in the streets and delivering them to the sun cults to be brainwashed. And I love these guys so much. Absolutely amazing. So that's verisimilitude. That is verisimilitude. The feeling of a world exists. Now, a lot of that is done through presentation, but it also has to reflect mechanically. And it's kind of like the logician in that way, in that there's not necessarily a mechanic that ties into verisimilitude, but that it impacts all mechanics. It impacts all mechanics. Because the mechanics have to present a logic system. Mechanics need to follow a logic system native to the world that is different than ours in some way. I'm going to examine that statement a little bit. Does it have to be different than ours? Can you have verisimilitude in a biography? This is me inviting comments here. Can you have that feeling of a world existing if it's about something that has actually happened? It's not dramatized, nothing at all. It is just straight up like biography of Steve Jobs. That's an interesting question. I think I'm leaning towards yes. Because I think you can have a biography that doesn't feel like a biography, right? You can have a biography that doesn't ring true to people. WiFQuest, I certainly think so. I'd love to hear why. And I know chat is a terrible conversational tool for stuff like this. We need to get like an interview up with a narrative designer in a video game studio and talk through this question. I'm going to add a quick note here. Can you have verisimilitude in a purely factual recounting? Not only can you have, but is it necessary? And yeah, I think so. I think the answer is yes. Because if you have a biography that you are going in with an understanding of what that logic system is, because it is our world, we understand that implicitly. So it's coming with this logic system baked in. And if it doesn't follow that, we're going to bounce off of it, right? We're not going to feel that it's real. In fact, okay, so here's some good case studies. I've been studying YouTube a lot, right? There is a very strong divide between very successful creators who say this is all skill. You can have a successful YouTube channel if you are good at YouTube and you can reproduce it. And then you have usually unsuccessful content creators. It's not always these two camps, but usually they roughly fall into these groups. Unsuccessful creators that say it's all luck. These people that are up here, they're up there because they got in early. Us down here, it doesn't matter how good of a content machine I produce, I will never be able to grow because it's all luck. And I think those two things clash. They live in the same world, right? It's our world. These are facts. These are things that are actually happening, but they have different logic systems that they're following. So I think even in biographical settings, yes, you need to establish what is the logic system that we're following here. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. Wife Quest on Twitch, yeah, I agree. I would definitely agree. The truth usually is. Usually is somewhere in the middle. Okay. Cool. This is being really interesting. This is exactly why I love doing this stuff with you. Absolutely fascinating too. Let's see here. So what's next? Next up we have precision. So what's our precision? I mean, I think we talked about it a little bit. Where we're kind of inherently implying it is high skill ceiling. So there's a certain amount of difficulty. I think there's a space. I think that can look like different things, right? I think you can have a precision platform that is difficult because there are many systems to juggle. And then I think you can have a precision platformer that is just requires intense mastery of a single mechanic, right? I can do either one. Mario is intense mastery of a single mechanic, right? And they knew that's what they wanted to do. It's why they spent so long making sure that the jump feels right in every game. And even in modern Mario games, they don't usually layer all that many mechanics on top. And if they do, it's usually in relation to jumping, right? Like the biggest thing that I can think of where they changed that was in Sunshine Mario, right? What's it called? Super Mario Sunshine. Where you've got your backpack with the water jet. And yeah, the water jet reinforces the jumping, right? You can hover with it and stuff. But you also are going to be aiming with it. And I think there was another Mario that had to do with painting and it was kind of a similar thing. But if you look at a lot of the other more modern Marios, you start to see that Super Mario Odyssey had Cappy. And really, Cappy's entire job was helping you to jump an extra time. It was a high difficulty, like third jump you could get. And then granted, it gave you little breaks from the jumping because you could possess things, right? But they lean very heavily into intense mastery of a single mechanic. And then you have things like Hollow Knight, which I think are more about many systems. You've got jumping, moving, same as Mario, but then you also have swinging your sword, which is different. You have making sure that you have built your character in such a way that that swinging of the sword and the jumping and all that sort of stuff is doing what you want it to do. You've got your magic system, which they play on by a bunch of different ways, right? There's a lot of different systems you have to keep in mind the entire time when you're going through very, very difficult situations. And another thing about precision platformers that I really, really hate, but is inherent to their nature. High risk or high danger. And that danger comes through high consequences for failure. So we've got like checkpoints that are really few and far between. We have losing resources. We see that in Dark Souls. especially in more modern Souls games, checkpoints are not all that bad. There are a couple of examples of checkpoints that suck, and especially in the early games, they were a little bit more stringent with those. But that was never really the problem with dying at a boss fight in Dark Souls. It was you have lost all of the souls you built up. And they heightened the tension by saying you can get it back, though. I think that's interesting. They do give some amount of light. If they just wanted to be crushingly awful, they would have just said, sorry, souls are gone. You're done. All over. They didn't do that. They said you have a chance to recover. If you're good enough. In fact, Bloodborne is a game that conceptually is entirely based around that concept. Right? All of their combat is you can take hits now. You can get hit, and we're going to give you opportunities to recover, but it's on the caveat that you really know what you're doing. You have intense mastery of the rest of these mechanics. So something with platformers, now that we're starting to talk about platformer precision specifically, I think is that you have continuous input. And what I mean by that is you have control at every step. Very, very rare in a precision platformer to have control taken away from you. So in some platformers, you will run and jump. And now your velocity is set. Your trajectory is determined. The second you press jump. That's usually not the case in precision platforms. Usually you can jump and you can let go of the directional key you were pointing and you'll just drop. Or you can even go backwards in air, right? You have a lot of control. I think another important thing while we're discussing that concept of control is the ability to act on demand or cancelable actions. So in Hollow Knight, if I am swinging my sword and I press jump in the middle of that swing, I think it will cancel out of the animation for the swing. Whereas in other games, it might, or it won't cancel out of the animation. You can jump and swing your sword at the same time. Can you imagine how different of a game Hollow Knight would be if you could only swing your sword on the ground? That kind of gets to interesting scarcity, but boy, it would come at a big, I don't know, I guess you could say a hit to precision, but you could also say you now have to be super precise, because jumping is not an offensive tool, it is only a maneuverability tool. And I think there could be something interesting to explore there, to be honest. Could you have a precision platformer with super restrictive mechanics, and so you can only take actions in certain instances? Has to be done in a way that is, boy, really difficult. Really, really difficult to pull that off. You have to be better than me at making games in order to make that happen, I think, in a satisfying way, where when you accomplish a milestone, you say, yes. Ooh, that's another thing. Precision milestone based, right? So that's good, because that's going to tie in very heavily with RPGer, right? Very, very good observation there. So precision needs to have milestones. Ooh, and that can start tying into the upgrades. In fact, we see that in Guacamelee, right? Because in Guacamelee, as you grow in your upgrades, you are then able to do different precision platforming that you could not accomplish before. Metroidvanias, right? Very underlying design principle there. Lovely. Let's keep looking at precision. Failure states are tremendously important as a mechanic. Failure states need to be accessible? What's the right word there? Failure states need to be very present. They need to be a threat. An ever-present threat that builds drama, right? As the buildup of tension. I have all this stuff that I can lose. It ties into loss aversion. That is what this is about. That's what precision is about. Loss aversion and accomplishment. If we go to our octalysis frame. Bring that. Whoop, whoop, whoop. So. This is about, this is about avoidance and accomplishment. And could you say empowerment? Maybe. One thing you do here in like your Super Meat Boys and stuff is that it feels good. And that's the empowerment, right? I think unpredictability is the antithesis of precision, right? You can't have precision if you don't know what to expect. So that's another interesting point. It needs to be dependable. And that doesn't, once again, be a little bit nuanced. This isn't to say that you can't have any randomness. If you look, once again, at Metroidvanias, you look at Moon Knight, or Hollow Knight, excuse me, I've been reading a lot of Moon Knight recently. If you look at Hollow Knight, the boss moveset, Mega Man, right? Another great precision platformer, which we didn't even bring up. The bosses have randomized movesets, but they have movesets. And so if you can learn the moveset, you remove the randomness. And so that feeling you get when you now understand how a boss operates, same thing with Dark Souls and everything, and you can pick out exactly what they're going to do within the first couple frames of their animation, and you can now react. It empowers you to avoid loss. That's powerful. All right, cool. Getting some good stuff. Failure states need to be an ever-present threat. Drama, loss aversion, good. And I think we could even have layers of failure states where with some being more fail-y than others and with higher consequences. So an example of this would be a health system, right? Health is a way to make loss less dramatic, because now you can take hits and not have to restart. In fact, that may have been one of the major design considerations around Mario's mushroom to grow him, right? Because now that dramatic tension of loss avoidance eases up just a little bit. Not all the way, eases up a little bit. And that's important because when we're discussing an interactive or any sort of media, once again, if we go to our journey map template, and instead of doing delight to frustration, we have stress. I'm doing my computer, I can just type it. And we keep everyone on a scale of stress to relaxed. If we keep people constantly in a state of high stress, they're going to leave. They bounce. Because no one wants to be constantly stressed out. It's not emotionally satisfying to be constantly stressed out. That's just called life. We don't want to live that way. You know, we play games to get out of that than when we're experiencing it in our lives. On the flip side, if it's pure relaxation, many people will just get bored. They'll say, there's nothing to keep me here. There's no contrast. So successful narrative experiences, whether that's books or whatever, most of the time, there are, of course, exceptions to the rule, but most of the time, they're going to follow this build of tension and a release of tension. A build of tension and a release of tension. As with all things in life, the way that we're just engineered to be, we love contrast. And so that delta is interest. Whoop. That's what keeps people engaged. Because there is now a contrast in dramatic tension that they are getting to experience. So we can have big success and failure states. We can have small success and failure states where when we get hit in Hollow Knight, we lose some health. Tension goes up a little bit. But then we finish the fight, but we're still like really badly hurt. Still a little tense. And then we heal using our magic that we built up over the course of the fight. Release of tension. And then we find a save point. Total release of tension, right? Okay. Let's go to speedsters. They are milestone based. I don't think they're milestone based. They are outcome based. In fact, they probably tie in with the accountant in a very similar emotional space. Because the point of the speedrun is not to beat the game. The point of the speedrun is to beat it within a specific time. It's a score. And the accountant and the speedsters both care about score. Like we talked about, social, outcome-based, time as a score. They're social experiences, speedsters. Speedsters don't exist in a vacuum. Not very well, at least. The case in point of this is AGDQ. AGDQ, awesome games done quick. If you're unfamiliar with it, a charity drive that happens regularly that is literally just a fundraiser. And the content that they provide during the fundraiser to keep people engaged in the fundraiser is speedruns. I once again into that social aspect, right? So I think it's brilliant. And I think it really shows that it's social by nature. You don't really see fundraising events for like Counter-Strike, right? You don't see fundraising events for Call of Duty very well. And yet AGDQ has scaled to the point where they're always on, constantly. They have 24/7 fundraising events going on for various charities and different sorts of things. So they understood that and they leaned heavily into it. So what sort of mechanics are social? There needs to be visualization of others in some way. This could be really interesting. This is kind of what Dark Souls ties into with the Death Stones. I've never considered that. Being able to touch those Death Stones shows you that they value that social side of the game, right? The social side of seeing other people fail can give you encouragement. If you see a ton of Death Stones on the ground and you know what's coming up, right? You've removed that randomness like we talked about in the precision section. You know what's coming up, you laugh. Say, oh man, because you remember where you used to be there. And you see your own growth implicitly, and that's satisfying. Once again, precision is milestone based. Of I have accomplished this, I can do it. Same with the RPG here. If you haven't accomplished it yet, tension winds up really tight. Why are there so many Death Stones here? What's gonna happen? And it lets you see others. And you can start comparing yourself to others. That's a very fascinating concept. So narratively, in this experience, in this incremental platform, we could have like shadows of others also running through the levels to various degrees of success. Right? What am I doing? And I believe there is it Forza? There's some racing game that does that, where they take other people's data on how they got through a level, and those data pieces show up in other people's games as shadows. I read just a heart-wrenching story of a guy talking about his brother's shadow appearing in his game that he was playing. And that was heart-wrenching because I believe it was a month ago, that brother had passed away from cancer. And then he got to see this shadow of his brother in the game again. Literally a shadow of his brother. And that emotional experience was social in a way that's very, very deep, very rooted into us as individuals. So obviously we have time as a score, we have outcomes, right? What are other outcomes? I'm going to move this ties in with the accountant to a different box because it's confusing me. Ties in emotionally with the accountant. So Speedsters, as a social construct, is about overcoming obstacles that others have set, but not just in the overcoming of them. That's Mario Maker. This is the I can do it better than. Better than is the credo of the Speedster. And so how do we help people have a healthy relationship with better than? Because you could be better than others, but that leads to a lot of self-doubt, self-criticism. It can have accomplishment, but it's fleeting. It doesn't stay forever. Because now there's someone else you have to beat. There's always going to be someone else you have to beat. And that chase can be exhilarating for people. It can also be very destructive for others. For many. Majority, I would wager. And the healthy way of better than is self. That's constructive, it's encouraging, and it's relative to your status and your capabilities. I was watching a video of Dr. K on Healthy Gamer GG Talk to Pirate Software. And he put this in a really fascinating way. He said, Thor, at Pirate Software, I think you have the stats to be a spiritual person, to be a religious person, if you wanted to be. You could take the prestige class and get that. And what he was saying there was, when he said you have the stats, he's saying you have the inherent nature to be successful in this space. And the reverse of that is implied of there are people who do not have that inherent nature, where this is an easy and successful space for them to inhabit. And that focus on self brings that to light. We want to compare ourselves to our stats, not others. So what are mechanics we can do to actually reinforce that? Mechanics that reinforce others are like leaderboards. Leaderboards is like the big one, right? Because that can encompass in-game leaderboards. It can also encompass external sources like speedrun.com or .net. I forget what it is. There's a website about hosting speedruns. That's kind of an industry standard. And records and stuff. What else would lead you towards others? To compare yourself to others. Because even though this is unhealthy, this is a story about kind of being unhealthy at the start. And so we may want to leverage this in an intentional way to create tension, create drama, and to create emotional contrast later on in the experience. Words. When you go to Reddit and you say, how do I get past this boss? And you see people just saying, they're so easy, right? I did this and it was so easy. You're dumb. Ego. I am. So it's not just better than, implicitly it is also less than. Is another interpretation of this. Better than is only one outcome. And it's an outcome that only 50% of the time people will experience. And that's not even true. But rather, in every attempt to be better than others, there will be a 50-50 chance you will be better than that person or not. Those are the two outcomes, right? And that's one misleading way to look at it. Because if you look at it in a deeper way, it's of course not 50-50, right? You're not flipping a coin when you're trying to beat a world record. So many variables go into it. Many variables, many transparent variables, invisible, but that the individual feels. This is interesting. I'm exploring this emotional concept. The individual knows how much they have worked or not worked. So when they lose, it hits different than somebody who does not know this person and is just observing. Loss is heavier with a greater understanding of the work that came before it. I don't have a mechanic for that, but I think it's a very interesting emotional observation. I think that is something that could be very powerful. Bystanders do not appreciate, do not understand the pain of loss, do not understand the impact of what they do and say. And this goes straight into the man in the arena speech. Let's take a quick look at that. I'm going to mute the music so we can listen to this. This is powerful stuff. And this is, I think, a very strong point of the emotional byline that we're trying to accomplish in this experience.
The poorest way to face life is to face it with a sneer. There are many men who feel a kind of twisted pride in cynicism. There are many who confine themselves to criticism of the way others do what they themselves dare not even attempt. There is no more unhealthy being, no man less worthy of respect, than he who either really holds or feigns to hold an attitude of sneering disbelief toward all that is great and lofty, whether in achievement or in that noble effort which, even if it fails, comes to second achievement. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. but who does actually strive to do deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
So powerful stuff in there, right? I think we can hit that really hard. I think we can hit that experience very, very hard. The contrast between the man in the arena and the member of the audience and the fellow gladiator, right? I think bringing in these other voices is very powerful. In fact, we could even bring them in as actual theme and mechanics. This could be a gladiatorial game. It could be about being in a space where people are observing, criticizing, rarely helping, and how all of those things impact the character's psyche and gets to those fractures. I think that I'm gonna bold gladiator, because I think that could be an interesting concept to pursue. Very cool. Very cool. I do think in order for speedsters to feel like what they're doing matters, there needs to be a certain amount of difficulty and precision, right? If you have a game where all you do is hold left and you just slowly go to the left and there's no obstacles and you hit the flag, you're done. I think a speedrunner would find that largely pointless. So there has to be difficulty. There has to be obstacles that slow you down. Yeah. I like that, because it doesn't have to be enemies. If you watch speedruns, and you watch like AGDQ and stuff, you'll find that one of the greatest enemies of all speedrunners is the auto-scroller. These are levels that move at a fixed pace. And when this happens, it's fascinating. This is so cool to be thinking about. When you see a speedrun go through an auto-scrolling level in AGDQ, something always happens. It's the same thing that happens every single time, telling us exactly what we need to know about what this means. Control. Once again, ties into precision. Okay. Because an auto-scroller takes control away from the players. They can no longer influence how fast this goes. In AGDQ, in this fundraising event, they constantly have people calling in and making donations. They raise millions of dollars every single time they run this. And with that amount of donations, they, with your donation, they will read your message on stream. It's a very social experience, once again, right? If they didn't read the message on stream, it would be a much bigger bummer of an experience. They're very smart in that they read it out. But at that quantity of donations, You can't read everything out. And even if you were just starting from the very beginning and constantly reading donation messages all the way to the very end, you're probably not going to finish. So whenever there's a lull in the action, whether it's between different runs of different games and they're just taking time to set up, or whether there is a moment in the game of low tension, that tension has released, they read donations. And every single time there's an auto-scroller where you have the level and it slowly is moving and the player's kind of jumping up and down and everything, but they cannot push the screen forward. They have to continue at the rate of the auto-scroller. The auto-scroller is devoted to donation reading. So, auto-scrollers are probably bad if you're trying to incentivize speedrunning. But, in contrast, you can have obstacles that slow the player. Because slow is a failure state for them. That's one of those examples of lower stress failure states. Because you don't have to restart, you're not going to be hitting a checkpoint, you're not going to be losing any resources. But it's a failure state for the speedsters. So they increase in tension in these places. These layers of emotional complexity, right? So if someone plays through the game casually, that might be kind of an annoying space, but it's not going to be traumatic. But then they can come back through as a speedrunner. Now all of a sudden they have a different set of challenges. So things that slow the player down. That can be moving blocks that you have to time the cycle correctly for. It can be enemy movement patterns that possibly they block a space for you to move through if you are not getting that cycle correct. It could be stuff like webs or ooze that may make precision more difficult, especially if they're placed in a space with enemies, but you can also just put them in a space where you're navigating. So this is all great for speedsters. Let's go to Challenger. We'll expand this out once again. Challenger. Actually, are we bumping into anything yet? Yes, we are. Move this all up. Challenger. What are mechanics for challengers? What do we got here? I actually have very little for all this. I think the key space for challengers, the biggest inspiration that we can get is Mario Maker. So you can make a level. There's a level editor. One of those key things. If we look at, oh gosh, what was that game that we talked about a little bit ago that was this concept of making a level so that other people will go through it and trying to overcome it until you die, until you fall? No, that's the VR sword game. Base construction and raiding game. Oh, what's it called? Oh, Meet Your Maker. So, there's Mario Maker. Oh, and okay, I never caught this before. Meet Your Maker. They were tying into Mario Maker. Very clever. Good job. Good. All right. There needs to be a sharing mechanic, right? In some way, some form. I think a really good example of this is seeds. You see examples of that in Slay the Spire, where they may not even be making the level, but they may play through a randomly created level and say, I like this challenge. I want you, friend, to go through this challenge to see how you interact with it. C's, very, very important. Also, I know we've had a lot of people on YouTube today. Welcome in. Thanks for joining. If anyone has subscribed, I apologize. I still don't have my alerts set up for YouTube. So, thank you for coming in. Anything else for challengers? We talked about this before. Data. A challenge sent into the void is no challenge at all. It goes back to this concept we've discussed a lot of times. If there's no one around for God to love, is he God? If the tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? Data has to exist in some way, shape, or form that shows the outcomes of people taking the challenge. And I think that could go in a couple of different directions. I used outcomes specifically because I think there's some interesting stuff to explore in there. The obvious one is pass-fail. That's an obvious outcome. You want to see how many people are passing, how many are failing. Meet Your Maker is entirely based around that concept. What I think we could start diving into more that could be even more compelling is what kind of builds are going into this. Build trends. So in Meet Your Maker, you can go in with different loadouts. It would be really interesting to get analytics to say, I see that people with rocket launchers are beating my maze more than everyone else. So now I can target them. I can make it a little more difficult for them. We up the challenge. Or we can say, this is a puzzle. And you have to use a rocket launcher to solve the puzzle. Now we're starting to get into something that we didn't even bring in here, which is the Riddler. They want to have an analytical problem-solving approach to overcoming a challenge. And the challenger can build that for them. I think that's fascinating. I think it's a very compelling statement. Oh, man. So many cool things. So many great ideas kicking around. I would love to have all the time in the world to explore all this with all of you, because I am just fascinated to spend the time with each of you, exploring all these different concepts, seeing what works, what doesn't work, make all the games we could possibly imagine. I think the world would be a richer place if we could. Okay. All right. I think we've got a lot here. Is there anything else in Challenger I can think of? They need some way to share, to send a challenge, whether it is they generated it or the game generated it, and they need a way to visualize the outcomes of it. Are there any other trend or any other data points that we could do? Would there be a care if it was attempt rate or attempt number? Just a raw, this many people have tried it. And then similarly, attempt percentage of it viewed versus attempted. And I don't know that I love either of those. I think those are good metrics if you're trying to like run a business, but if you're just trying to share a challenge, I think that replaces the motivations in an unhealthy way, which could be something we want in the sense of like this stuff over here, right? Of the man in the arena, the audience member, and the fellow gladiator. It doesn't have to be healthy and good to be interesting. It can increase tension, but we have to have releases of the tension. We have to be responsible with the stories that we tell. Once again, going back to our Thomas was alone analysis, right? Be responsible with the stories that we tell, that they are going to actually better the lives of people in some way. That doesn't mean there has to be a preachy lesson. In fact, the less you say what your thing is about, the better, usually. And you can have an experience that is just depressive and heavy, because the flip side of that is if someone is going through that and it's a meaningful, fulfilling emotional experience, that probably means they're going through catharsis. Catharsis, let me actually look up the definition. The process of releasing and thereby providing relief from strong or repressed emotions. So you can have something really heavy. Schindler's List. Right? This is not a movie you watch to feel happy. And I think horror movies play into this feeling very deeply. I think for a lot of people that are very big into horror, it's not about the 2 hours of heightened emotional response. I think it's about finding a way to process emotions. Even if everyone dies, there's no happy ending. The happy ending is that they are able to experience things that they have repressed, they have not allowed themselves to, even in just a very small way. So that's the positive outcome. That's the thing that helps people in the end. So I'm gonna say catharsis, and not even catharsis, but tension builders. I'm gonna put both of these under there. And I think pass-fail could be, I think both of these, honestly, could be tension builders. But I think there's also a tension release version of these. Where, as before, this is related to my success. My success. Am I smart enough? Is the question when it's unhealthy. Right? Am I smarter than someone else? Whereas in the release of tension mode, I think these metrics are less about am I smarter than others and more about have I helped others to grow? Have I provided a meaningful puzzle for them to overcome? To take this a bit of a step removed, this is where we start talking about Dungeons and Dragons. If you have ever run a game of Dungeons and Dragons, or any role-playing game, you've been a DM, GM, storyteller, whatever, then you know that there are different ways to do that. There are styles. And the one that people talk about in derogatory manners are when the DM feels antagonistic to them. Rocks fall, everybody dies, right? And the more antagonism that is perceived, the worse the experience is. And yet, we have the most meaningful experiences being described as ones where everyone gets an opportunity to grow, to flourish, to have an impact on the world. And that's what good DMs do. Have I provided a meaningful puzzle for them to overcome? Have I given them a space where they can grow? So in that sense, it's not just pass-fail, but we could see success over how many attempts I think it's a very powerful thing for both of these, frankly. We put that under here. And then, this is not something I want to build at all. I already know I don't want to, but comments and shares, right? These are all things that can build people up, can build a sense of community. You can say, oh my gosh, look at this puzzle. I love this person's stuff. They always make such great stuff. It can also be, this person's the worst. Don't you know how awful they are? And they use gotchas, and it's unfair. It's imbalanced. They only use OP stuff, right? It could be positive, it could be negative. I think shares, ooh, it's hard to understand how that could be a positive thing for the benefit of others. I think it would have to not just be a raw number, right? It would have to be passed through some sort of lens to demonstrate excitement, joy, satisfaction, that sort of thing. Satisfaction. My daughter is able to talk, but she's definitely learning still, right? And she has taken to saying that she has forgotten about something in a very delightful way that my wife and I just love every single time we hear it. She says, oh, I got for about that. And I will tell you, I practiced this. I spent a lot of time in the bathroom trying to say, how does she say it? There's like a cadence to it. It's like got about, no, wait, there's that middle part. There's like 3 parts to it. Got for about. And I practiced that because I love it. Brings me joy. Okay. This is all fascinating. I think we have a huge table here. Really interesting ideas. Unfortunately, it's gotten a little unwieldy. So how do we make this a little more legible? I'm gonna drag this out so it's a little shorter. Going to lock the table, grab this stuff, and these were in, take that all down, put it right there. Okay, right. So I think what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to start looking through these mechanics, and I'm just going to make a quick little note of what do I find to be the most compelling. I can tune that audio correctly. I need to set this up, get a mixer so I can pass the music through it separately from my speakers, because boy, it gets really loud for me and not very loud on the stream. And now it's like inaudible because the oh jeez, oh gosh, it's so loud. All right, whatever. Deal with it. We'll deal with it. We'll deal with it live. Okay, I'm gonna just read through these, and then I'm gonna note down what I think are the most interesting ones. So, I'm gonna grab talents, equipment, and loadout, because I find that very satisfying myself. I think it leans in heavily into kind of what we're trying to accomplish. I think we need to have very meaningful milestones, and the obtaining of upgrades is crucial for the incremental side of this game to function. And that all makes sense, and it's once again reinforcing why the RPGer is the #1 persona on the incremental side of it, right? Because pretty much everything we wrote down about this is like a, we need this in the game. Intuition. Once again, right? We're going to be doing our rapid prototyping. We're going to be seeing what sticks, what doesn't. It could be we end up going in a totally different direction. But our hypothesis, we have to start somewhere. Our hypothesis is that this is going to be meaningful. Logician, that feeling of more, I really love that's calling out to me, because I think it ties in very narratively to that experience that we're trying to build. That feeling of fear, insecurity, those are inherently lack of something experiences. Philosopher. And I like twisting that twists influence everything that came before them. I really love that concept because I think that's going to be really powerful, or a very powerful tool to keep in our back pocket for when we progress into that third act and we need everything to change emotionally. But we don't really want it to invalidate the rest of the game that came before it. We don't want to completely swap genres. We don't want to swap motivations or how people interact with the game. We need it to feel really different. And that's going to be tricky, and I think that twist that ties into everything before it is going to be a vital part of it. And it reframes and changes our perspective on what came before. Hacking. And this is a difficult one for me. I think there's a possibility of scripting languages of some sort. And I'm going to add a subsection to this, which is just automation tools, right? I think automation tools could be something here, but I struggle pulling much out from the hacker, even though I think it's a thematically important thing, because I'm not really a big part of that world. I don't like that feeling of cheating that I get when I use auto clickers. I feel like in overcoming the system, the meta system, I am robbing myself of an experience that was deliberately designed for me to have. And so I don't like that feeling. I can understand why people do have joy and satisfaction coming out of that. All right. I'm going to make a quick note here that hacker is underrepresented, but thematically crucial to the emotions that we need to convey, because that concept of creating a system to overcome the system is this. The system, narratively, that is going to overcome the system that leads to fear and insecurity is love. And finding a place and space where you can express that and develop it and leverage it for good, leading to these things. Hacking goes here. So I mean that when I say I really think it's crucial. And I just don't know how to do it. And that's something I'm going to have to do a lot of research on. Get out of my comfort zone on. Okay, the accountant. Constant visualization, I think, is going to be crucial. Constant visualization. I'm seeing that theme over and over again of visualize, visualize, visualize. Verisimilitude. I think that feeling of being invited into the world, crucial. And that the mechanics need to follow a logical system native to the world that's possibly different from my own. We need to, even if it is my experience, it's going to be nobody else's logical system, right? Everybody else lives in their own subjective perception of reality. So what I perceive as real and as logical and as the set of rules that we all follow is not what anyone else is going to have built up inside their mind. So we need to share out. What are those rules? What is this world? No matter what. There's our answer to our question. Can you have verisimilitude in a purely factual recounting? Yes. It's necessary because everybody's world is different. Because we all experience reality subjectively, and my world is different from everyone else's, and vice versa. Cool. Great. Love this. Let's keep going. We are in precision platformers now. What mechanics do we want to pull out of there? I think difficulty is going to be a pretty big deal. And danger, consequences, I think are going to be absolutely critical, not only in conveying that precision platformer and in making the speedster have their day, but in conveying the emotional journey. It's going to be required. I'm actually going to delete all these. Don't need those anymore. I'm going to move all of these over here. Okay. And I really want the failure states to be layered. There needs to be high danger, but I want those dangers to be different based on what you're actually trying to accomplish in the game. If you're just trying to beat it, you have one layer of failure state. But if you're trying to speedrun it, there's now another layer of failure state. We want to play into both of those. And that failure state for the speedrunner can be a low tension failure state to provide feedback and learning opportunities to the player if they're not trying to speedrun. I think that can be really powerful. Layers, layers, layers. Sociality. We need to find some way to bring this into a social experience. Somehow we need to visualize that for people. And then for the challenger, I like the idea of seeds. And I also like the level editor. I like all this data, but I think that would have to wait for someone who's a better developer than I am. Because that would require internet connection and gathering that information, aggregating it, displaying it, making sure that we're sanitizing all the data. I think this is something that I think would be very rad, that I am wholly unequipped to be able to tackle at this point in my career. And that's just fine. We'll keep this in our back pocket. Okay. So we've pared things down a bit. Let's see if we can start finding mappings of them, where they kind of relate to each other. Scarcity, meaningful milestones, obtaining upgrades can obviously go with upgrades, feeling of more can go with upgrades. The invite into the world, maybe meaningful milestones? Just doing a general affinity mapping here. What are they like? Constant visualization of what they are generating. I think that feeling of more ties into that pretty well. I don't think it's really going into verisimilitude of that being invited into the world or meaningful milestones. Unless... this is a good thought. The milestone for the accountant is the number. Right? And so if we wanted to create an emotionally stressful experience for that accounting side, we can say, look how far you have to go. This is where I'm going to start swapping over to my iPad. So I want to start more freely diagramming. It's not just about gathering data. Now it's about associating and stuff that I feel like having a pen will facilitate that method of thinking a little bit better. All it needs to do is load, which Figma is always so great at doing. Come on, Figma. Come on. You gonna do this or not? All right. While this is loading, I'm gonna try restarting the app. Come on. We're gonna say these, if we want to communicate a contrasting gap, we can say next upgrade is at the next digit, right? So going from 10,000 of something to 100,000 or more. The higher we drive that up, the higher we have that delta, the more that feeling of more is going to be there and lead to that feeling of insecurity, not being enough. Okay? There we go. Now you follow myself. We're over here. Okay. Lovely. I think there's some powerful stuff there. Level editor. Very opposite of scarcity. Level editors, by their very nature, are the only scarcity is the amount of time and attention people put into it. But I do think there's a kind of implicit invitation into the world. So that's an interesting concept. Level editors as a sense of verisimilitude. That's a concept. Seeds. Similar story. You are actively being invited into the space. So, twists that influence all that came before them. I think this is spanning. You know, if this is a Venn diagram, whoop, and then we've got kind of this space over here. Twists that influence all of them would be that middle space, right? And they would be levels up. Scripting languages and automation tools. Once again, I think it's very far away from scarcity. It's not even about obtaining upgrades, really. I think it's in sort of this area, weirdly enough. That's an interesting concept. Can the hacker, in their quest for overcoming the system, reinforce the system? I think that's a really compelling question. Instead of writing that, which would take a long time, I'm going to type it. Ugh. And once again, I think that's a really powerful emotional byline because that is my story. I am trying to overcome the system of full-time employment in such a way that I help people have full-time employment. I gotta figure that out. I need to dive into that hacker persona. I've gotta learn more about him. I think there's something really powerful there. Something that can be really heavily leveraged. Mechanics need to follow a logic system native to the world that is different from ours. That's very much an invitation. If everything is random and chaotic, that may be funny, but it will not be inviting. It will be inherently hostile because you don't know what to expect. Once again, principles of humor, right? Something is that shouldn't. And that will either be funny or be angry. And so while you may get some lol funny moments, it's not going to stick around. As soon as people start to understand that it's chaotic, the novelty will wear off and it will just become grating. Difficulty. I think that ties in very heavily with scarcity and upgrades. And we do need to pick, do we want to juggle many systems or one system? And I would say, for the sake of being a first-time developer, we need to go simpler so that I can really focus and dial in on one mechanic. So it's social. Speedsters don't exist in a vacuum. That very much goes over here to the level editor, the seeds, all that sort of stuff. Another interesting concept is, how does speedrunning tie into an incremental? That is a very obviously important question that I have not asked myself yet. They're inherently at odds with each other in a lot of ways. And that one is slow and one is fast. Incrementals are slow. Speedsters are fast. You can be fast at slow things, but it's still slow. But it's also very hard to socialize and share out doing something slow fast unless the delta is huge, right? If someone says they beat Elden Ring in 10 minutes, that's a lot more impressive than saying I beat or beat Elden Ring in 5 hours. That's much more impressive than someone saying I beat Mario in 5 hours. About the delta. The bigger the delta, the more marketable it is. Okay, I gotta write that down. Or attention grabbing. It is. Great. All right. I think I heard my daughter get up. So we're going to do these last 2 mechanics, get it all affinity mapped, and then we'll start tying them together tomorrow. High danger. This is going to be over here. It's going to be in scarcity, difficulty, high consequences for failure, and then failure states being an ever-present threat. So it's kind of over here. In fact, that threat is kind of what propels you to obtain upgrades. So let me start drawing like some connection lines here. High danger because of failure states. If monsters do 1 billion damage and only have 1 life, but every time you get down to 0 life, you just come back at 1 life, exactly where you were, with no other consequence, like, it's not danger. That's just, you take damage, and it's meaningless. Failure states reinforce the high danger. High danger reinforces difficulty, and informs it. Informs scarcity. Or failure states also inform scarcity. Scarcity informs difficulty. Hitting the upgrades drives, or rather, failure states are what drive upgrades. They're what drive that pursuit of upgrades. Feeling of more reinforced by obtaining upgrades. Because upgrades should be more plentiful than your resources. It goes to scarcity. Upgrades reinforce the difficulty. You can make things harder because you will have to progress. So you make things harder, which seems impossible, and then you get upgrades, and then you can overcome them. Upgrades are reinforced by and reinforce obtaining upgrades. Upgrades are driven, the excitement over upgrades is driven by failure states emotionally. Ugh. No one will read that. The feeling of more, I think, is created by the visualization and the obtaining of upgrades, right? I think the feeling of more could also be reinforced by difficulty. You see that in Metroidvanias, where they... what's the way to say this? You get hints that something is going to be obtainable. You see a ledge that's too high for you to reach, and there's nothing that can be done to reach it. You kind of have this implicit idea that I'm going to be able to get to there at some point. That makes you feeling less than. There is a gap between who you want to become and who you are now. Pressing gap. Getting up. It's constant visualization. Okay. Got meaningful milestones are an invitation to the world. Many times, the meaningful milestone is the invitation. Save the world, right? That's a request for help. please come, and there's an action. Save. Save the world. Meaningful. Mechanics need to follow a logic system. I think that reinforces that invitation. And I kind of want to tie like this to everything, right? That feels lazy. But it feels like there's something there. Level editors and seeds tie into the invitation. Especially if the person that's being invited doesn't have the game. That's a direct invitation to purchase, right? Or someone may buy the game for their friend to say, hey, I want you to try this. I think hacking can many times be a social experience. It can be social in the sense of being social with the system. It can also be social of, I beat the system, I want to show off. Or I want to help others beat the system. Figure the delta, reinforcing the sociality of speedrunning. So, a good speedrun that is marketable will not be... the delta can't be, you know... Normally you beat it in 5 minutes, now you can beat it in 4.5 minutes. It has to be 1 minute. Or less, right? That delta has to be huge. I'm seeing a lot of self-reinforcing things over here, which has kind of become the player mechanics. And over here in purple, let me change these. Well, no, before I do that, this is like the world mechanics. World and narrative mechanics. Discovering of the Mariana Trench, right? You don't really know what you're looking for until you plot it all out. And then it starts to become kind of self-evident. Oh, let me change that up too. Okay. So I think what we're observing here is, I think there's a big, bright, happy playing field over here for player mechanics. And we need to think about how do we reinforce the world in the narrative. Because this is seeming a lot lighter in comparison. Maybe we'll tackle that tomorrow. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. This has been a wonderful stream. I've had such a great time with you all. Thank you. For those of you on YouTube, thank you for joining us. For those of you on Twitch, please hang around. We're going to go ahead and raid someone. The very first raid ever. Please hang around. Just say hi when we jump in the chat. You don't need to make a big deal out of it. Just say hello. Happy to be here. And we'll kind of just enjoy another person's company for just a little bit. That being said, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Hold. Finding a good channel. Great. Just hold on. Hold on.
James, thank you for the raid. Appreciate that a lot. How's your stream? How do you do? I'm working on my crafting system for the game I'm working on. It's going really good. Really great. I got inventory working with, so I can add and drop things from the inventory. Excited to see some reveal work. Thank you for the follow. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, so I can show it off for now. We can press E on the rocks. They get added to our very, very crude inventory, but they're here. So I pick up 3 wood. I have 3 wood. Now I can select these stones and drop them, and I can select how many. So I can drop 3. And now I have 3 stone on the ground, which I can then pick up again. Which is, yeah, so drop wood and these things too, and they'll just stack, so I can pick them all up again, and they're back in my inventory. So now I'm working on the crafting for this, where I'm just cooking everything up to check the recipes and stuff. Exciting. Really enjoying the process of figuring this out. I'm trying a new approach too, to where I'm using components instead of doing it the old way I've been doing before, where I add everything like to the player blueprint. So now I'm making actor components here that I can add to different parts of the game. Hopefully, like maybe a chest can also have an inventory, so we'll see how we integrate that later, but trying to do things by components instead of the whole putting everything into one actor solution. Oh yeah. Are you also an Unreal Engine developer? Very cool, thank you for sharing. Lost Legacy is the name of the game. Yes. Crafting, survival genre, kind of. It is gonna be a game about you. You come upon a lost village which has fallen, so it's in ruins, and it's your job to go out and collect the resources to build that village up again. So it's gonna have those collection mechanics. You're gonna have to craft things and collect things, and you go back to the village and you slowly build that up again. So you might build like the blacksmith up, and then you can craft things in the blacksmith and different houses, and so yeah, something like that. Getting my feet wet with GameMake right now, wanting something with a fairly limited scope and quick learning curve to get stronger development skills before starting anything with 3D or anything. Okay, that's really cool. I played a little bit. I played a little bit with 2D engines before, but I have to do 3D personally. I love 3D. That's my love. Rebuild this place setting. Thank you. If you want to take a peek at the GDB, it's in here. just skim through like the first overview part, and you'll get a general idea on where I want to go with the game if you want to, of course. But that is essentially like the kind of plot. It's condensed down to some paragraphs there at the top. And that can be, yeah. I really appreciate you stopping by. It's awesome. Thanks for the raid again. Really glad to see that. Where was I? Inventory. Right. Over to ingredients, over to this. Of course, represent to hang and learn with you. Thank you for sharing your process. No worries. Like if you're wondering about any of the things that I've done in the project, just feel free to ask. I'll show you how I've implemented anything that you might have questions about. But yeah, really awesome stuff. Oh, let's see what I'm doing here. I am checking, I am decreasing quantities and updating inventories. Okay. Ingredient, right? We need to get our inventory from over here. And we should be able to drag this here. This our other function kind of... Yeah, we just initially set that item name immediately when we come into the function, but might argue that we could do that. Check if it's valid before, and if it isn't, we'll just immediately return, and then we'll do the remaining stuff. So, whoop, there. Right, so we check the item name there. We're gonna do the same kind of here, where we check this initially when we come in, and reroute these under here. And we'll set the name like that. Okay, an item name doesn't exist as a local variable. We can fix that by right-clicking. So do we actually... Yeah, in item name, just a reference to it. So alright, we do get the ingredients. For every ingredient we have, we need to get our inventory. And we need to find the item. So do we break this into here? Yes, we do. And we check if we can find it, just in case. So if we can't find it, we should return false here if we cannot find it. If we suddenly call this function and we didn't really mean to. And this will be public. Oh, right. Jumping too much between the tabs. I need to go to the inventory again, see. So if we're true, we decrease by that amount of quantity that we had. But we could as well just pull from here to decrease item inventory. This can be done in one operation. Yep. So if we find it, then we can take the... We call the inventory and say that we want to get rid of some things. We want to remove item from inventory. The item we want to pass in here is going to be a item list name. And the amount we want to remove is this one. So who